Okay, so the IDB Group is a leading source of development financing for the Latin American and Caribbean. Since its founding in 1959, the IDB has worked to find innovative and effective approaches to address the economic, social, institutional, and environmental development challenges of Latin America and the Caribbean. With a focus on poverty reduction and on improving people's lives, our work has helped to lay the foundation for sustainable development in the region. As a group, the IDB, where I work for, works with the public sector, but also includes the IDB Invest, which focuses majorly on the private sector, and also the IDB Lab, that tests innovative ways to enable inclusive growth, working primarily with SMEs. In 2021, the IDB had financed and mobilized $23.4 billion, but cumulatively, it has invested more than $260 billion in the region. The investment projects that we finance are in key sectors like transportation, energy, education, health, water, and sanitation, with an emphasis on poverty reduction and on improving people's lives. The tourism sector, the bank is a key player in the region, and it has invested over $1.2 billion in Latin America and the Caribbean. The projects that we support aim to strengthen recovery post-COVID, increase tourism economic benefits and contributions to the local economy, strengthen the distribution of tourism benefits to groups in vulnerable conditions, strengthen environmental and climate management in tourism, and improve tourism governance in Latin America. The bank's performance in the sector is actually embodied in a tourism sector framework, which has these 5 central lines of action. It's almost considered our Bible. In any project that we finance in the region, we incorporate those 5 components to address the challenges for tourism development in the region. As you might know, the Latin America region has enormous potential thanks to the wealth of its natural and cultural resources, and it has experienced a steady expansion in the last decade. In Latin America, 10% of GDP comes from tourism, whereas 40% in the Caribbean. In terms of employment, tourism generates over 15% of jobs in Latin America and the Caribbean. I wanted to show you this slide mostly to show you that since we're talking about transformation and transition, the bank in Latin America has also been experiencing major transitions in understanding, in knowledge building, in capacity building in the region. So in every decade, we learn something and we incorporate those learning into our projects. So in the 70s and 80s, the bank was mostly financing infrastructure. Most of the airports, if you go to Brazil, for example, most of the airports in the northeast region of Brazil have been financed by the IDB. Whereas in the 80s and 90s, we learned that tourism is not only infrastructure. So we incorporated economic growth and sustainability in its projects. But we keep learning. So in the last decades, we have also been concerned and heavily concerned with environmental sustainability and more lately with climate change. So supporting the transition today, and this is what the focus of my presentation, the financial perspective, I wanted to leave with you 3 key messages. The first one is that while we are experiencing challenging scenarios in the world of global finance, there are new opportunities for supporting sustainability in tourism. It's almost like turning a lemon into a lemonade. The second one is that traditional ways of financing tourism development are no longer enough. And the third one is that the strength and the growth of sustainable finance for tourism and increased access to capital markets depend on environmental, social, economic, and climate data that can be verifiable and measurable. So the new global financial landscape after the aftermath of COVID, as we are experiencing in this, in this last few weeks, so it's what characterizes this landscape: global inflation and high interest rates, and the uneven impact of COVID, which is increasing debt burden of developing countries with higher rates. But also in developed countries, the financial instability has been in turmoil, with the high interest rates. Economic stress owing to the war in Ukraine, reduction of disposable income of average consumer, and the urgency to address climate change, all of this impacted global finance and the likelihood of carbon taxes. So responding to this new macroeconomic and financial landscape, which, for example, higher interest rates will definitely impact the cost of capital. Airplanes are already, thinking in short hauls and longer stays. Buildings, we have to think about lower costs and carbon footprint, higher resilience. Disposable income is also an area of concern for tourism at the moment. So I wanted to give you two examples of areas that the IDB has been working in the region. The first one is in the Amazon region. The IDB is currently supporting studies to better understand the tourism dynamics of the 8 countries there are in this region, to build capacity and enhance tourism governance. Because as more people are attracted to the region and want to visit, there is an opportunity to support sustainable tourism development for the Amazon. Direct flights from the US, for example, from Florida to Belém do Pará, which is an entry point to the Amazon, is already a reality. We are talking, Brazil has submitted Belém do Pará, the city, to host the next COP30. So the city is going to be prepared for that, and so direct flights, shorter flights from Florida to Belém are already starting. The second example that I can show you is the Jesuit Road. The bank is supporting 5 countries of the Southern Cone, Argentina, Bolivia, Paraguay, Brazil, and Uruguay, in a strategy of regional integration based on the development of productive corridors, among which is the Jesuit tourist corridor. This corridor is a legacy shared by these 5 countries, started in the late 1600s and is still alive today. And as you well know, investments to preserve local heritage for tourism purposes are effective for both boosting arrivals and increasing tourism expenditures. Studies have shown, for example, returns are up to 29% due to increased tourism expenditures in Argentina because of investments on those cultural investments. Sustainability and innovation are essential to finance mobilization. So as we all know, we need to support long-term solutions. And those are the new, the new investments ways that we are moving into. So support long-term solutions. We have to promote faster transitions, and we have to embed policies that can be both implemented and effective. And for this, we are at not only the IDB, but multilateral development banks like the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, that have been supporting policy-based loans. Policy-based loans have become a very important instrument for supporting a faster transition in the region. So not only policy-based loans support economic development and poverty reduction in borrowing members, but also because the implementation of policy reform and institutional change contributes to strengthen the economic and sector framework of a country. It creates an enabling environment in a much shorter time frame. The second example is actually green social sustainability and sustainability-linked bonds that are becoming drivers of sustainability. Almost 700 billion euros in new green bonds occurred in Europe in 2021. And in Latin America, those sustainability-linked bonds became the most frequent used ESG instruments. With a market of more than $60 billion in Latin America, sustainability-linked bonds represent one of the fastest growing segments within the sustainable market, with most issuances related to environmental and decarbonization initiatives and the preservation of natural ecosystem. We cannot forget as well the power of startups. Startups, just in the past two years, the investments in startups have been up to $27 billion in travel companies, and hospitality startups remain a leading category for investment. And finally, the third message, which is data is at the heart of policies and financial instruments. We need to feed the financial market and institutions with information and data that is usable, scientific, rigorous, reliable, credible, comparable, accountable, and accessible. Too many adjectives, right, for the information. But otherwise, our investment choices can be questioned. You all have heard about greenwashing, and we need to ascertain that those risks are accounted for, climate risks and nature risks. And we already know that investors are placing greater scrutiny on ESG instruments and are seeking better information on risk, return, and impact, and are also demanding actions to mitigate ESG risk exposure. One challenge, however, is how to have more transparency, and I think we are going to discuss more of this during this event in a workshop tomorrow. So I would also like to mention a couple of bodies that have been involved in assessing the use and consistency of ESG information, its materiality across industries, and how the information should be prioritized and scored. The first one is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, created by the Financial Stability Board in response to demand from the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. This is a powerful tool for supporting the industry with this financial disclosure majorly related to climate change. The second one is the Task Force of Nature Finance Disclosure. It has more recently been launched, but we will also develop and deliver a risk framework for organizations to report and to better report on evolving nature-related risks. And finally, I could not leave outside this discussion the role of observatories of tourism. Observatories, they support continuous and timely measure of the impacts of tourism, and the measurements they provide can offer tourism stakeholders with up-to-date and reliable evidence to assist in capacity building, tourism planning, and other key decision-making processes that can contribute to tourism sustainability. So, as mentioned by Mr. Pedro Duque, things can go wrong, right? And financing can go wrong. But I would like to leave you with a positive message that done the right way, tourism stakeholders, public and private sector, will have ever more opportunities to pursue their tourism development efforts in a sustainable manner with financial instruments that reward good choices, without creating a financial burden for them. To the contrary, it's going to create more opportunities to use their resources more sustainably and effectively. To make this a reality, we need to tie together better monitoring, accountability, and transparency. While the public sector has a role in policy making that supports tourism sustainability, both the public and the private sector need to strengthen their efforts to enhance sustainability in tourism, as the future of financing in the sector will rely increasingly more on how investments are being implemented. Thank you very much.